Good morning, everybody. Meteorologist Jim Dickey here in the ABC 7 Hurricane Center with another edition of Tracking the Tropics as we look out across the tropical Atlantic. Still two named storms out there. Jerry fell apart yesterday, now just a remnant low that's moving its way across the central Atlantic. But still, tropical storm Karen barely hanging on to tropical storm status this morning. And then on the other end of the spectrum, on the other end of the Atlantic, we have major Hurricane Lorenzo, which appears by all indications, to be rapidly intensifying. So here's the latest on Lorenzo. The NHC actually put out an intermediary advisory, a special advisory, to upgrade Lorenzo to a major hurricane this morning. Major hurricane, remember, means Category 3 and higher, 125 mile per hour winds, moving to the west-northwest at 15 miles per hour. And you can probably see pretty clearly here the eye of Lorenzo clearing out. In fact, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the satellite and zoom in. I'll pause it here at the last frame of this lapse. There's your eye of Lorenzo. It's nearly completely cleared out. This is all indications are this has now established a well-developed inner core, meaning intensification, strengthening set to continue. We get more of that classic structure as you look at the wide view. Note on the fringes how the those sort of fuzzy clouds are moving. We got movement this way in this cloud shield, this way in this cloud shield, generally a clockwise motion to the upper level clouds. That means high pressure has set up aloft, which means the storm is venting. It's taking the hot, warm ocean air from the surface of the ocean, bringing it up through the center, and then spreading it out. It's become that sort of perfect heat engine that tropical cyclones, that mature hurricanes become. So again, all indications are Lorenzo is going to continue to strengthen. That's what the official forecast from the Hurricane Center calls for. Category 4 by later on today. 140 mile per hour storm, maybe even making a run at Category 5, but it should be peaking over the next 24 hours. We get into Saturday, already starting to encounter some cooler waters. We get into early next week. It moves into the central Atlantic, continues to move over cooler waters, and continues to weaken. And again, look at where the cone is, look at where the United States, the Caribbean are. This comes nowhere near any land areas. The perfect type of hurricane, as far as I'm concerned. We can watch the structure, we can study it, but it's not going to produce any type of impacts in the land areas as it moves its way off to the north in the open waters of the Atlantic. A fish storm, as we like to call them. Now here's Karen, a very different looking tropical cyclone at this point in time, that's for sure. It is still a fairly weak system at this point in time, per the NHC, barely holding on, barely maintaining tropical storm status. Winds at 40 miles per hour. It's moving to the north-northeast, still, quickly, at 15 miles per hour. Continues to, again, make gains on latitude. Now, what I'm watching this morning on the high-resolution satellite, it did have a nice blow-up of convective activity, of thunderstorm activity, around the center overnight, although it looks to me like the center is right in the middle of your screen, right about there. So it's not perfectly symmetrical, for sure. And look at the backside, the western side of that convective shield in this last frame. Those colors are going from dark red to yellow, showing signs already collapsing. And also note that sort of arc of cloud coverage here on the eastern side of Karen. That's a sign that there's more in the way that thunderstorm activity collapsing. It's sort of outflow, rushing away from those thunderstorms. If you're seeing sinking air, you're seeing collapsing, you're seeing outflow, it's a sign that this is not as healthy as it could be. And the past couple mornings, Karen has fired up those storms overnight, and then as it worked through the morning hours in the afternoon, the storms collapse. So indications are that likely to happen again. But we have the thunderstorms near the center, so at the very least, maintaining that tropical storm status at this point in time. Now, part of the reason Karen is struggling, see the swirl over the Bahamas? This is looking at water vapor satellite imagery, which along with showing you the water vapor content in the atmosphere, the very dry air, the orange you see over Florida, giving us nice weather of late, by the way. That swirl is an upper level low pressure area, and that has provided a little extra shear into Karen over the past couple of days, keeping it from being a good environment for Karen to try to come together. And also, I think, helping to push it a little further north than some earlier indications were going back through the past week. But still, there's your model plots. Just about each and every one of those tropical models shows a bit of a loop-de-loop and an eventual turn to the west, as high pressure is still going to build over Karen and is still going to eventually steer whatever we're seeing at that point in time westward with it, perhaps still a tropical storm. but there's a number of hurdles, including that upper level low that's shearing it right now in Karen's way. The first of which, so of course tropical systems, their fuel is warm waters, is warm ocean waters. Well, the waters over the Bahamas right now and east of Florida actually fairly cool, especially for this time of year. Still warm enough to support a tropical system, but we're not talking water temperatures like we were seeing when Dorian moved through these areas. Then we had water temperatures in the upper 80s, in the 90s. It was like rocket fuel to Dorian as it moved in. Dorian and Umberto have actually brought up some cooler waters. A process called upwelling moves away the top layer of the water and brings up cooler waters from down below, from the depths. So the waters have cooled down, and as such, there's just not as much fuel for Karen to try to strengthen as it works its way westward. Further, that same high that's going to steer Karen is going to bring even more shear into the picture. So models really coming into line now that Karen is not going to survive much past the weekend, if it even lasts that long. This is the European forecast model. There's Saturday. Karen on this model right there at this point in time. I want you to note how the winds are working. So you have a closed-off counterclockwise circulation there, a little closed-off circle. So at that point, it still has, the circulation is still a closed-off area, low pressure, probably still a tropical storm at that point in time. We go into Sunday, and that circulation is sort of weakening. Now you're seeing more of a broad circulation, a sign in the European that it's falling apart. And by the time we get to Tuesday, yeah, it's more or less gone. We now have an open wave of low pressure, kicking up some thunderstorm activity. But in fact, a number of models now show what's ever left of Karen, likely a remnant low at that point in time, sort of drifts around and then finds a weakness in that ridge because it's moving so slowly and works to the north. So now, looking unlikely we see any impacts whatsoever from Karen here in the state of Florida. So some good news there. There's the official forecast from the NHC calling for Karen to be a depression by Sunday, and then to be a remnant low by the time we get to Monday and Tuesday as it slowly works its way westward. We'll still be watching it, still check in on the forecast with Karen every now and again over the next couple of days. But again, I think the window is closing on that having any type of impact on Florida or being any type of legitimate tropical threat to anyone in the United States. So some takeaways here. Lorenzo, a major hurricane. It will continue to strengthen here in all likelihood through the day, but it's a fish storm. It's going to stay out over the open waters, not a U.S. threat. Karen is weak, likely going to fall apart as we head into next week. Not expected to impact Florida, certainly not Southwest Florida any longer. And hey, the good news, we didn't talk about any additional threats because there are no additional threats out there right now. No other areas of potential development, at least for the next 5 days. We sort of expect this. It's officially fall now. Next week, we're heading into October. While hurricane season a long way from over just yet, things tend to calm down at least a little bit as we get further away from that peak back in the early part of September. So some good news there. I'll be back next week. Take a look at what Lorenzo and Karen are doing at that point in time. Till then, I'm meteorologist Jim Dickey. Have a great weekend.